Welcome, everyone, to groups this week and to week 3 of our month of prayer and fasting. Just last week, we spent time looking at the spiritual healing that Jesus seeks to bring into our lives, first through coming to Him by faith and inviting Him to come into our lives and heal us from the disease of sin and fill us with His new, eternal, abundant life. And then also to help us from then on out find freedom and healing from the sins that seek to entangle and snare us and hold us in bondage. Our prayer is that last week some significant work was done in your life concerning the healing of your soul. That for some of you, you trusted in Jesus for the first time in your life. And for others of you, that you found greater freedom over sin in your life. Today we are going to explore another area of our lives where Jesus seeks to bring healing and wholeness to our lives. This is in the area of our emotions. Before Pastor Danny guides us through our discussion on this topic, we are going to take some time to reconnect with one another. Pause the video and talk about these two questions in your group. Question 1. When life feels overwhelming, what's one healthy thing you tend to do to cope or find comfort? Question 2. Have you ever been surprised by how strongly you react to a situation and later realized there was something deeper going on beneath the surface? Pause the video now, and when you come back, Pastor Danny will help us reflect together on the topic of emotional healing.
Well, welcome everyone to your group this week. We are exploring together this month the various aspects or dimensions of marpe or healing that Jesus seeks to bring into our lives. Our key verse during our month of prayer and fasting is Malachi 4:2, and hopefully by this point this verse is familiar to you. Would you read it out loud with me as a group? But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. You shall go out leaping like calves from the stall. Last week we looked at how Jesus wants to bring spiritual healing into our lives as He heals us from the disease of sin that has left us spiritually dead on the inside, and that we take hold of that healing available to us through faith in Jesus. We also talked about our ongoing struggle against sin and how Jesus desires to heal us as well from the ongoing presence of sin in our lives, healing us, setting us free from the sin that entangles us and hinders us in our walk with Him. Finally, we rejoiced in the fact that our struggle with sin is only temporary, because on that day when we step foot finally and fully into God's kingdom, our enemy sin will be done away with forever. This week, as Tabitha mentioned, we're moving on to the second area of our lives where Jesus desires to come with healing in His wings, and this is into the area of our emotions. Many of us need emotional healing, whether we know it or not, and Jesus wants to heal those areas of emotional wounding within us. We began on Sunday simply by looking at how many of the Psalms are Psalms of lament and how they model for us open honesty about our emotions, and how being honest about our emotions and naming them is a crucial first step towards healing. I also pointed out how many of the Psalms were written by King David, a rugged warrior king who led many into battle, and yet he was very comfortable being open and honest about how he felt in the inner struggles he faced. There was no disconnect between his masculinity and his being in touch with his inner self. We talked about how in our day there can be this undercurrent in the way we think about masculinity and femininity, that the realm of emotions and feelings are more feminine, and to be a man is to detach ourselves from our emotions and feelings. And I hope our brief examination of the Psalms suffices to show us that when it comes to the realm of emotions and feelings and naming them and processing them and being real about them, that this is in fact simply a very human concern, men and women. We are emotional beings, and as such, we can all bear emotional wounds that Jesus wants to heal. We're going to take a bit of time right now to talk about two questions in your group. So pause the video now and discuss these questions together. Question 1. Why do you think naming our emotions and wounds is such an important first step toward healing? And then question 2, how does the honesty of lament in the Psalms challenge the way we sometimes feel we have to present ourselves at church or around other Christians? Pause the video now and talk about these questions together. Well, welcome back. We also took time on Sunday to explore part of the story of Hagar, the servant of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And Hagar experienced abuse and mistreatment at Sarah's hands and ran away. To put it in plain terms, she just couldn't take it anymore. She had had enough. The emotional wounds she sustained at Sarah's hand were too much. Hagar is pregnant with Abraham's child, but she runs away into the wilderness, and there in the wilderness, in the midst of her pain, God meets her. Take time in your group to read Genesis 16, 1-16, and then reflect together on these two questions. First, Hagar calls God the God who hears me and the God who sees me. Which of these truths do you find more comforting right now, and why? And second of all, one of the most painful aspects of emotional wounds is the belief that we are alone. Hagar felt she was alone. What helps you remember that God is near when you feel isolated or overwhelmed? Pause the video now and talk about these questions. Well, welcome back. Allowing Jesus to begin to heal our emotional wounds involves risk. We talked about this using the image of a lion with a splinter in its paw, and we talked about the walls we often build around our places of wounding to prevent anyone from getting close enough to wound us or hurt us in that area again. Often these walls present themselves as lashing out in anger, or withdrawing ourselves from others, or being guarded around others. Sometimes our walls present themselves as taking on a public persona, for example, where we might be the life of the party. But really, it's all just a show to keep people from seeing and knowing the real me and the real you. But healing involves risk. It involves opening our lives up first to Jesus and many times to others as well, because God will often use other people to help in our healing. This can be hard and maybe even painful for us to do, but it's necessary. Of course, we need to be wise and discerning about who we might open ourselves up to. As you think about this and talk about in your group these two questions, and when you're done, Tabitha will be back to give some guidance on our fasting week next week and to send us out with prayer. So here are two questions I want us to consider. Question one, the sermon said healing often requires opening the door in the wall that we've built around our hearts. And so what makes it hard to open that door to God and to others? And then question two is this: God often brings healing through people, through friends, through family, through professionals. Why do you think receiving help can feel harder than offering help? Is there a time that you can think of in your life when God used someone else to help heal an emotional wound in you? Talk about these questions together and then come back and Tabitha will join us again to close us off.
We have just one more week to go in groups for our month of prayer and fasting. Next week, when you meet, our church will be in the midst of its annual fasting week. And that's what I wanted us to talk about as we close. If you have been keeping up with the daily devotions, you will this week come up with your fasting plan for next week. Some of us may have already begun fasting this week or earlier in the month, but for the rest of us next week, we will engage in the spiritual practice of fasting, and I want to take a few moments to ensure we are all on the same page as to how that will work. First of all, it is crucial that you read the fasting guide that our church has produced. There is a link to the guide in the weekly church newsletter, and a few hard copies available as well outside the church office. This is the place you need to begin, especially if you have never fasted before. Next Wednesday, January 28th, has been designated as a church-wide fasting day. We are encouraging everyone in our church to fast on this day in some way, either for a full 24 hours, or fasting from breakfast and lunch and breaking your fast at supper, or fasting from one meal that day. We get questions sometimes from people with certain health conditions and whether or not they would be able to fast. Our answer is always, you need to speak with this about your doctor. We are not in the position to be able to offer medical advice. For most of us, though, we can fast. The bigger question is, will we fast? And I want to encourage you to jump in next week and give fasting a try. For those of you who have never fasted before, participating in the fasting day might be a big enough step for this year. However, for others of us who have fasted in the past, we want to encourage you to stretch your fasting goal this year. You might try fasting multiple days next week, or fasting the entire week, breaking your fast after 6 p.m. each day with a light meal. You might choose a 72-hour fast with no food, just water. There are many possibilities. We want to encourage you to see Wednesday, January 28th as the center point of your fast and build it out from there, a fasting plan that you have prayed about and seems to be the one God is leading you towards this year. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Pastor Danny, and he would love to talk with you further about participating in our fasting week and fasting day next week. One thing I would like for us all to keep in mind for next week is that as we fast, it is important that we use at least some of the time we would be engaging in preparing meals and eating to spend time with God. If this important part is missing, all we are doing is going on a diet and not participating in true biblical fasting. As we close, I want to pray for you, and then you can break up into groups of 2 or 3 for prayer. Today, as you pray, would you share with others in your prayer group 2 things? First, as you reflect on the topic of emotional healing, what is one small step you sense God inviting you to take toward emotional healing, whether it's prayer, honesty, community, or rest? Second, what your fasting goal is, if you have decided at this point, and what it will be. And then take time to pray for one another, first for the steps you will towards emotional healing, and as you fast next week, for strength and perseverance, and most of all, that you would encounter God in the midst of your fasting. I'm going to close this in prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for each person who is participating in the month of prayer and fasting. Thank you that you have called us to do this as a church. Please, God, help us have the energy and the strength and the drive to follow through this month with keeping up with the readings. You say, draw close to me and I will draw close to you, God, and let us draw close to you. Help us keep up with prayer, Lord. Help us be praying out loud and in our spare time and in those times when we are fasting from our meals. God, please help us go deeper in our walk with you, Lord. Each of our walks is so personal with you, God, and help give those of us strength who are feeling despondent. Dear God, thank you for the healing you are already working in so many lives, God. Thank you for the work you are doing in this church. Thank you for the spiritual and emotional healing you are doing right now and will do in the future. Thank you that you were the same yesterday, today, and forever, Lord. Thank you that the same God who did miracles that we read about in the Bible is the same God we worship and serve today. Dear God, let this be a time of blessing and encouragement for each one who came out to the small groups, Lord, and for those at home who need physical healing. Dear God, we just love you and thank you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.